Thank you, Dr. Jaijit Bhattacharya, for taking your time from an extremely busy schedule to be here. Thank you, Desai ji, Paranjpe ji, and Sri Marathe. Thank you all for coming on this morning and being here to be part of the deliberations of the next 2 days. I would like to thank all the delegates to be here for discussing the issues that Desai ji just mentioned. I'll go back into a little more depth as to why we are doing what we're doing. Why are we having this symposium today? So isn't a strong military sufficient to secure India? Why are we talking about securing India, securing trade, securing technology? What is the need for that? We have one of the strongest militaries in the world. What else do we need? What are the other aspects of a nation that we need to look at? Why is securing domestic industry critical for national security? Why is technological sovereignty important? Now, all of us have heard of different kinds of wars. We've heard of non-kinetic warfare, we've heard of warfare using water, weaponization of narration, weaponization of this, weaponization of that. There are multiple dimensions to war. And it's only India that should understand first that there are multiple dimensions to war thanks to all the work done by Chanakya and people post that who had explained how warfare is played out, and military is one very important aspect of it, and it is perhaps the last resort to warfare. So what does an adversary want? Let's look at the fundamentals of war. Why does anybody want to get into warfare? It's not a hobby, right? Alexander didn't go around the world as a hobby trying to conquer lands. Neither did Genghis Khan do it just because it's fun. They want to enrich themselves and their people. The Mongols wanted to enrich themselves, the Greeks wanted to enrich themselves, the Central Asians wanted to enrich themselves. Therefore, they went around marauding over half the world. And what do? They do so by taking away wealth, right? So there were Central Asians who came to India, they took away wealth and they ran away. That's one form of war. But the second one, which is even more debilitating, is by ensuring that the subjugated population continues to generate wealth for the aggressor. You continue to work hard, I'll continue to tax you harder, and the more you work hard, the more you will be in penury. In fact, this was a stated principle of Alauddin Khilji also, that if I can keep the population a little above poverty, then they will not be able to rise up in revolt, but they will continue to generate wealth by doing agriculture, by doing crafts, and a massive amount of tax will be put on them, and that's what will get extracted. And that is the second way in which wealth is generated by aggressors. Obviously, in the modern world, this has evolved, and we'll see in the next few minutes how this has evolved in the modern world. But let's also see what is wealth. There are people who have taken away gold, they have taken away jewelry, precious stones. Keep in mind, these are only a token for exchange of wealth. What do you do with gold? Nothing much, right? But you use it because you can exchange it for food, you can exchange it for pulses, grains, maybe furniture, chair, and so on and so forth. And then there is another aspect of wealth, which is technology. You use technology to convert everything around you, the earth, the plants, the sky, the air, into wealth, into things that you can use, into machines, into a mobile phone, right? You extract critical minerals and you make the screen out of it. You extract various other minerals and you convert that into wealth. And how do you do it? Using technology. If you look at what are the kinds of technologies taken away from India? Wood, steel. The concept of steel did not exist. Carbon was supposed to be impurities in steel. For 1,000 years, India controlled wood steel. You could not have a defense equipment without wood steel in it. It was almost like Intel Inside in computers. I mean, some of the older generation would remember the ad of Intel, that Intel Inside, because nobody knew what's running the PC or the laptop, and therefore wood steel was an Intel Inside for all defense equipment. There was high carbon steel, only created in South India and in Sri Lanka. Eventually the technology got stolen. They did not figure out how it's working for a long time. It gives a very flexible blade, so the blade doesn't break it, which is why in Kalaripatti you will see the whipsaw. Have you all seen the whipsaw? That's because of this technology that you can have the whipsaw, and therefore all the defense strategies built around that. Sugar manufacturing, the Tan dynasty kept harassing the Harshvardhan kingdom in the 8th century to part with the sugar technology. And eventually they had a raid over the Gangetic plains, they killed 3,000 people, they took away the technology, and they manufactured sugar at a huge volume. Before that, sugar used to be referred as sarkara, shakkar, and so on and so forth, which is where the word sugar comes from. And then suddenly it started to be called chini, because China started exporting it back. Just like Misri is called Misri because it came from Misra, which is Egypt. Zinc manufacturing, shipbuilding, calculus, trigonometry, all of this was taken away. And that is another loss of wealth that we had. So wealth is primarily about control over technology and control over labor. And therefore we come to the aspect of colonization. It is not just that there is British ruling over India, they are gone and colonization is over. So we redefined colonization about 20 years back, and we said disproportionate extraction of economic benefit from an area of influence through manipulation of the rules of engagement through either force or deceit. And the rules of engagement could be any. It could be the TRIPS agreement, it could be the IT agreement, it could be the myriad set of FTAs that we are signing. These are all rules of engagement, and therefore you would keep hearing this word when you open up the news. There should be a order of rule. There should be a rule-based world. Have you ever asked whose rule are we talking about? Is it India's rule? Did Rani Lakshmibai did not follow India's rule by pushing her adopted son to be the next king? It was not India's rule, somebody else's rule. So what do we mean by rule-based order? Let it be my rule, and then we can have a rule-based order. And therefore there were three kinds of colonization. There was social colonization, which we had within the society, every society, nothing different in either India or Britain or in Europe or Russia. It was all the same, where a small portion of people within the society would get disproportionate economic benefit. Then we had the classic politico-military colonization. We're all familiar with it. We have been taught about that in our books, in our movies, and so on. So we understand that. The phase that we're going through is what I'm calling as technological colonization. It's got many names. People try to call it neo-colonization, modern colonization, and so on and so forth. All we need to be aware of is that the rules are stacked against us, and therefore we are being given the wrong side of the stake in terms of the economic advantage from the framework that we are living in. Let's start with the digital colonization as a quick understanding of what's happening. Because it's important, because it's getting woven into the trade rules. Intellectual property is created. It's created because there are countries who are ahead of us technologically, and I'll also delve into how they're ahead of us technologically. I'll take a few examples. They take those intellectual properties, patents, and so on and so forth. Some of them are submarine, which is that it's not visible. They take it to international standards and make standards out of it. So everything that we are seeing in this room, the speakers, the microphone, the laptop, the projector, they're all built on standards. And standards makes them interoperable. But the moment you use the standards, you are then using somebody else's patents. And therefore you are paying a rent, which is unfair rent on IPR, that is being paid to somebody else. And that money goes back promptly into creating more technologies and staying ahead of the curve, and thereby will finding it difficult to cash out. In fact, the narration has always been, let the developing economies provide raw materials and let the advanced economies provide the technology. We took that hook, line and sinker for decades. That's what our role is. That's what our dharma is, that's what our karma is. We will dig the soil and provide the raw materials to whoever needs to convert that into actual technological usage, and then we'll pay them an unfair rent on that because they have the right to give us the technology. There were $1 billion of patent war that had erupted between these two things that you see on the picture. One is by Samsung, one is by Apple. I've asked this to my students, in fact, over here in this institute multiple times as I've been here teaching for over a decade and a half. What is the patent violation over here? That anything that is flat and has got round corners is a patent of Apple, and Samsung is violating that brilliant patent. Nobody else in the world can think of it. A flat phone with round edges is a patent. There are many such frivolous patents over there, many. So China woke up in around 2004. Madame Wu was the vice premier of China. She had about 18 rounds of discussions with Dick Cheney, who was the vice president of US at that time, on a small standard called WAPI. WAPI was China's standard for Wi-Fi. Right? All of us know what Wi-Fi is. So China said, well, from our colleges, there's another standard that has come up. And the regulation that China passed is that any Wi-Fi equipment made in China and any laptop, any PC made in China must also support WAPI. And on that, the vice premiers and vice presidents of two countries had 20 rounds of discussion. And the reason being that that shakes the foundations of control over technology. What happened in the next 15 years? China became dominant in technology. This was not the case in 2004. 2020, China is recognized to be a dominant force in technology. They planned it out, they strategized it, they understood what's happening. And they played the same game that US is playing back in the US, in Europe, and so on. What did US do? No matter which regime came in, Trump, Biden, doesn't matter. They came out like a ton of bricks in China. Sanctions on this technology, sanctions on that technology, PCAS, the president's body on semiconductors, stopping access of semiconductor technology to China. And why is this war? Because China did not get these technologies on the platter. They got it by means other than what's above board. It was war. It continues to be war. And US is hitting back. Where is India? We're neither on this side nor on that side. That doesn't mean we are not making huge strides. The purpose is for us as a community to understand what is the geopolitics of technology that's going on. Some of the trade agreements we had signed, I don't need to point out when we signed the trade agreement, the graphs kind of gives away. This is a trade agreement with Korea, that's a trade agreement with ASEAN. One is the blue line is for imports into India, the red line is exports from India. I don't need to tell when did this, the trade agreement happen, exactly when the two lines separate. 2009, the two lines separate, we had this trade agreement. We stopped exporting much and we started importing in huge amounts from these colonies, or from these countries. So it's not about West versus East, it's India versus the rest of the world. Be it Asian countries, be it the Western countries, we need to wake up. If we keep dilly-dallying and saying, oh, we'll not put anti-dumping duties, it makes us look bad. Oh, we'll not put countervailing duties, it makes us look bad. Well, then we can start looking good and be poor and not have jobs and not be economically superpower. But that's not what our ranking is in the global order. We are ordained and destined to be the largest economy in the world, to be the most powerful country in the world, whether we want it or not. The point is, how fast can we get it? How fast can we enrich our people? Here is an example of Atmanirbhar Britain. 1813, they prohibited ships below 350 tons from plying between Indian colonies and United Kingdom because the shipwrights in Britain went to the king and said, when your Royal Navy needs us, you will not find us around because the Indian ships are beating us hollow. We don't have the technology that they have. Their ships are cheaper, bigger, better, stronger. And their life is much longer than our ships. So no one in the right mind will buy British ships. But we've got small puny ships. The large Indian ships can carry cargo much more efficiently and they can carry slaves much more efficiently. So this rule was brought in. 40% of market access of ships from Surat and Bengal got decimated that year, 1830. This is all there in the archives of British Parliament. So if anybody comes up and says this is all Managadit, that's not true. It's there in your parliament in Britain. Then that was not enough, because that still did not help the British shipwrights. The 60% market share was also good enough for the Indian shipbuilders. So in 1814 they came out with another law saying that Indian built ships cannot be operated under a British flag for the very lucrative transatlantic trade. And what was the lucrative transatlantic trade? Slaves being sent from West Africa to America. So the ships would go to West Africa, pick up slaves, dump them in America, pick up gold, dump them in Britain, go back to West Africa, pick up slaves, and do that. So the more slaves you can put in, the better it is. And Indian ships were unfortunately very, very good. But they were taken away because the British ships could not be competitive. Now look at the situation. Whoever bought the British ships had to pay more. They had to pay more. But it was Atmanirbhar. When the Royal Navy of the King needed shipbuilding and ship repairs, there would be skills, there would be an industry to support them. So they were willing to pay more for the day-to-day trade because they could achieve Atmanirbharta. Cut to this week, in fact, day before yesterday, the US government slapped 100% duties on Chinese EV, 102% duty on Chinese lithium-ion batteries. Protectionism, India's protection is, India hides behind protection, Bombay Club, our cars are not competitive, our goods are not competitive. We've all heard of this, right? What's happening now? And then they have the Baba Act. Baba Act is nothing fatherly about it. It is the Buy America, Build America Act. And the rules are so strict that entire telecom network chain, right from sand to the fiber optic, has to be built in US for serving US network requirements. And now what will happen to China? They have built up the capacities. They want to, send stuff to America. Now they will start dumping them in India at whatever price they can. And what will happen to our industries? There will be voices in India which will say, it's very good, we're getting things cheaper, what's your problem? Consumers are getting it cheaper, what's your problem? Please have it. But do we realize we're destroying our own industry? Not only that, we've got subsidies in areas like electric vehicles, batteries, electric buses. Who's getting the subsidies that is being paid by your taxes? Chinese. So your taxes is going into supporting the Chinese Atmanirbhar. Obviously, our government is working very hard. And again, the point is for the larger set of community to understand what is going on and where do we need to pitch in. So a quick comparison between then and now. Why we use the word colonization is that time agreements were signed under innocuous pretext and were touted as treaties. Manhattan was sold against a bunch of red cloth. They shook their hands, they signed a piece of paper. Obviously the tribe which was selling off Manhattan, which is the richest piece of property in the entire world, did not know what those papers meant or what the red cloth meant. But it was a treaty done and Manhattan was transferred. Some people from the colonies were co-opted in the system. And therefore we will hear, China se lo na, sasta hai, acha hai. Right? Even if they are good, should we? Indian ships were good. Did the British buy it? They destroyed it. And when the metal ships came in, we didn't have the technology. So we are now technologically backward in shipbuilding. Why? Because technology is not just engineering. It's about the economics, the business, complete, and the people accompanied with the technology, which then leads to the creation of the entire ecosystem. Only that is technology, not just the engineering. We lost all of that. Therefore, the next version of ships we could not build. The next scientific advancement in shipbuilding we could not do. Same is what's happening elsewhere. In all cases, the local economy suffered immensely. Trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights. So we talked about two aspects. One was technology, one was trade. Now what's happening is picking up technology and plonking it back into trade and then twisting arms. Now when did IPR and so on became very, very important in India and rest of the world? Around the 1960s, if you recollect. Before that, IPR was there, some kind of copyright, some kind of patent, some used to happen, some wouldn't. But after 1960s, it became a stringent call from the West that you must follow intellectual property rights. Why 1960s? Because the last of the colonies went out. The last of the African colonies went out, and therefore, how do I sustain my quote unquote quality of life, my overlordship over the rest of the world, without which me and my people cannot have the kind of lifestyle that we're having. If you had seen the videos of 1947, they were jeering videos which said, what can India do? And here are people dying on the street without food. What can these bunch of buffoons do? But we have granted them freedom, but they are a basket case. The last bit was squeezed out and were thrown out, like, you see the cane juice, and cane is put in from one side and the juice is taken out and then is thrown out. And that's what happened in 1947. We are built back. But then, how does the West continue to sustain their lifestyle? By saying that now you have to pay for the intellectual property rights. I'm not interested in governing you. But whatever you do, you will use my technology and you will have to pay me a rent on it, my hafta. You have to pay my hafta on it, and that's where trade and technology gets interwoven into a framework of global domination, where we seem to be, where we were in a losing side for quite some time, and now we seem to be slowly getting back. Another example of this TRIPS agreement, we as India are known to be the pharmacy of the world. I have personally made ambassadors of various countries who said Indian medicine saved millions of lives in our country because we could not afford the Western medicines. They personally came and told me. And so what did the West do? When we were shipping out our generic medicines through an airport in the West, in Europe, those medicines were stopped. They were not meant for Europe. They were meant for other poor countries in Africa and Latin America. But these shipments were stopped, saying, oh, these are fake medicines. As per their own law and as per TRIPS, will stop them. You can go and search on the net, you'll find what happened. This is war. This is clearly war. There are many other examples. The decimation of the penicillin G industry. Again, cheap Chinese exports to India. They brought it cheap. We shut down our public sector units. Our tenders bought Chinese medicines. Once everything was decimated by 2011, they brought up their prices back to what it used to be. So that was the end of Chinese cheap penicillin G. Penicillin, for that matter, is extremely important for the military. It's very important for treating all kinds of wounds. And now the government is coming back and spending taxpayer money on PLIs to bring this industry back. Around 35,000 crores has been put, rightly so. But the point is, it was a lose-lose if you look at it from a 15-year period. We lost our industry, and then we're losing, and then we're paying through our nose for that penicillin, and now we're paying taxpayer money to bring that industry back. Dumping of isopropyl alcohol into India, very critical component of pharmacy. Again, there are countries who are dumping isopropyl alcohol into India, and that's completely demolishing our capabilities and capacities. We need to take action now. We can't think for 1.5 years, 2 years and deliberate as to whether we should take action, whether we should not take action, what will somebody else will say, what will US say, what will Saudi say. We need to take action while our industry is still alive. RMOC is a critical mineral which comes from Korea, where Indian ferroalloys manufacturers import it, and so does Korea. Korea gets the raw material, which is RMOC, from elsewhere, pays no duties, adds 10% value add, sells it in India. Indian manufacturers does exactly the same, gets raw material from outside, does 10% value add, sells it in India, except that when it gets it from outside, it pays a 2.5% additional import duty. So Indian products becomes 2.5% more because of our taxation. And guess what? Indians are price sensitive. So what's happening? Under the Korean FTA, we're getting everything from Korea, which is why you saw the graph going up, and we are killing off our industry. And ferro alloys are extremely critical for our space, for our military, for our ships, for our barrels, and so on and so forth. Dumping of PVC into India, same issue. PVC powers 29% of this economy. 29% of the economy is dependent on PVC. Again, we are seeing the same issue, PVC getting dumped, and our industries are getting significantly impacted. And so on and so forth. Even agriculture, something as simple as jute. Our friendly neighbors, Bangladesh, has provided significant subsidies to their jute growers. our farmers are getting impacted. There are 4 million farmers that we have, 1 million jute workers that we have. All of them are getting impacted. And these are issues that we need to deeply look at. What the report also does is bust the narration that India is using a lot of anti-dumping duties. India is an irresponsible trade player. If you look at the graphs, and I'll explain the two graphs very quickly, the left hand side shows that yes, India uses a lot of anti-dumping duties, but they're very, very small and then for a limited period of time. What the US and Japan does is puts a significant amount of anti-dumping duty. They'll probably put 10, 15, but each one of them has got huge amount of impact. And they continue to put it for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. So there is no way that Indians can get access to the Western markets or any of these markets. The other narration is that Indian products are uncompetitive, that's why they need protectionism. Anti-dumping duty is protectionism. Well, if Indian products are so uncompetitive, then as the right graph shows, why is rest of the world putting so many anti-dumping duties on Indian products? What are they scared of? Indian products is uncompetitive. Let them sell at high price, no? Why are so many anti-dumping duties being put on India? At the same time, on the same breath, we are saying that Indian products are not competitive, and therefore Indian government is indulging in protectionism. This is not protectionism. What US did is protectionism. This is merely trade remedies as allowed by the WTO agreements. Now we are playing by the rule of the world. It is your rules. We are following that. Still, there is a problem. So these are the issues that we want to discuss in the next 2 days. And we are very, very fortunate that stellar speakers, thought leaders, policymakers, academicians, people from the military, they've all joined in for the next 2 days to deliberate on these issues, to bring out more information, to throw more light, and to enlighten all of us. Thank you so much. I look forward to your participation over the next 2 days.